When considering issues of privacy and in an office setting, the architect should be conversant with, all right, we have 4 different answers here: IIC, STC and NRC, NFPA, ASTM. So the first thing to say is ASTM, definitely not that. ASTM is a standard, kind of like UL or something like that, where it's not a code, it's a sort of established and recognized reasonable institution that has come up with a whole series of standards so that other people like contractors, architects, code officials, and everybody, when they have conversations with each other, can all know what each other is talking about. So it's a standard system. So D doesn't have anything to do with privacy. C is NFPA, that has to do with fire protection. So definitely not C either. Then we have A, IIC, and B, STC and NRC. The IIC is that's the Impact Insulation Class, I believe is what the IIC stands for. So if you imagine that you have a floor structure and, let's see here, see how this works. Okay, there's my leg in a high heel. And here's the person downstairs. And goofy looking person. And the high heel is walking, and what's happening? They're making that impact sound. That sound is traveling through the structure, and then it's coming out into the space. The IIC, the Impact Insulation Class, is a way of defining how much sound is making it through. Every different type of floor assembly, like a concrete floor, will be different than a steel structure floor, than a wood floor. They'll all have different ways that the impact sounds travel through the structure. And while that's important and meaningful, it doesn't really have anything to do with privacy. So, okay, the obvious answer here then is B, STC and NRC. So let's talk about those for just a quick sec. So STC ratings, if I have a wall and I've got somebody on this side of that wall and they're talking on a phone. I know nobody talks on phones anymore, but maybe they're texting, but it's loud. No, they're talking on a phone. And so they're having a private conversation on that phone, and they're talking and it goes into the wall. The T of STC is the sound transmission class. And so what that's talking about for this wall assembly is the sound transmitting, sound transmission class, the sound transmitting through the wall, right? So I have somebody over here who is potentially listening in to this phone call on the other side of a wall. If I have a high STC rating, then I'm going to have much less sound going through that wall. If I have a low STC rating on that assembly, I'm going to have a lot more sound going through that wall. So this is definitely an issue of privacy. Would show up very often in apartment units, in housing, but especially in things like office spaces that, like the conference room or the HR person might have to have a very high STC rating because they're talking about very private things in those offices, or a lawyer's office. So STC ratings, absolutely part of privacy, and would definitely be a sort of a topic of discussion that you could imagine on this particular exam. And then the NRC. So let's think about the NRC for a second. NRC is the noise reduction coefficient. I always get class and coefficient mixed up, so you should always check, make sure I got it right. And in that situation, where let's say I've got somebody sitting here and they're sitting at a table or at their desk, and they're also talking on the phone, and they're having this loud conversation that's going up and it's bouncing off the ceiling. So if we imagine that ceiling, let's say it's made of glass, very hard, flat surface, well, that's going to bounce that information, all that sound directly to that other person. So they're going to get a really clear, they're going to hear every aspect of that conversation. But if I have a ceiling that has a very high NRC rating, and so that would be why you often see these kind of speckled looking ceiling tiles, is that they are specifically formulated for this issue, that instead of getting that direct, simple bounce, I'm going to get a much more diffuse bounce. And some of that sound is going to get absorbed into that material, and some of that sound is going to bounce, back over this way, but some will bounce back over this way, and some will bounce. In other words, it breaks it all up. So I don't get that clarity that I would get with that really hard surface. Even a drywall ceiling will have a much harder surface than a typical drop ceiling. So the NRC is talking about how the sound bounces around in the space, and that can absolutely have impact on privacy, especially in an office setting. So that was probably pretty easy, but I think it's good to kind of put in your head the idea of STC is about transmission, moving from one side to another. NRC is about the quality of the sound within the space, and that idea of the direct line of bouncing sound.
Looks like everybody got that one right. We did have one comment going back. Andre noted that, talking about pricing, he said in his firm they've hired an estimator during the construction documents phases where they use unit pricing based on your specs and plans.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is a really smart thing to do, and highly recommended. And in fact, in some countries, in the UK, for example, it's very typical. They have a whole industry of people who are not part of contractors' firms, but are just estimators on their own. And you find that in the United States as well, but it's not as big an industry. But it's definitely a good idea. I would absolutely recommend it. It's just that it's hard to get that paid for, and so it doesn't usually fall into the typical contracts. The expectation is that the architect does it. Now, if the architect does it by handing it over to someone else, that's fine, but it's your role to produce it. The other part of what you just said was that it was doing it during the CD phase. What that's really doing is saying, okay, we get pretty good estimates at DD, we feel pretty confident, but before we actually send it out for a bid, like before we get to that spot, let's just check it and make sure. Let's get somebody who's really on top of it, can really go through all those unit numbers and make sure that we're on target, so that you don't get surprised when those things come back. If you do, if you say it's going to be $2 million and it comes back at 4, even if it comes back at 2.6 or something, you're going to redo all those drawings for free. So it's a big deal. You want to be reasonably close. Now, nobody expects the architect's original estimates to be right on the money. It'd be ridiculous. There's too many up in the air issues that are up in the air. There's no way you could possibly know everything. So nobody expects that. But if you're way off, that is a completely reasonable complaint for a typical client, and they will absolutely complain and want you to redo the set in order to get it in line with their budget that you agreed to try to build the building for. Yeah, it's a really good point. Thanks for bringing that one.
Thank you, Mike, and thanks to all of you who've tuned in. And if you'd like to attend our next a.r.e. live broadcast, visit blackspectacles.com/podcast to register. You'll have a chance to ask questions and share your answers with Mike for live feedback during the broadcast, just like today. And to learn more about our AIA a.r.e. prep curriculum, go to blackspectacles.com. We'll include a link in the show notes. And for those of you who are ready and want to go ahead and get busy preparing for the ARE, you can use a coupon, a 15% coupon off the first charge on any AIA ARE prep membership with code 527-15webinar. That's 527-15webinar. And that'll expire on June 15th. And of course, if you're already an AIA member, you can visit aia.org/ARE prep to get a 30% discount for the entire duration of your AIA ARE prep membership, not just the first charge. And that also expires on June 15th. And finally, please leave a comment below the video to let us know what you think, and share any suggestions that you may have. I promise we'll read every word that you write and use them to tune our next episodes. So thanks for watching.